When I first started writing Virtue Bombs, which came out 2+ years ago, I had one person in mind for the forward. It was someone I've been reading for years, someone who knew this space so well, the intersection of Hollywood and the Beltway, and someone who's been warning conservatives for, gosh, decades now. You got to get involved with pop culture. You got to create art. You can't just sit on the sidelines and complain. You've got to step in, take action, and tell a story. And of course, that person's Andrew Klavan. Andrew was so gracious to write the foreword to my book, and I'll never, never be able to thank him for that simple but just powerful act. Just a wonderful thing in my career, maybe my favorite part of my career to date. Why? Because Andrew's a great writer. He writes mysteries, he writes screenplays, he writes killer ghost apps. He's done it all in this industry. And along the way, he's been one of our smartest, most trustworthy voices when it comes to conservatism, pop culture, and politics. He's just one of a kind. And of course, he just keeps cranking out great mystery novels. His latest book is A Woman Underground. It's the fourth in the Cameron Winter mystery series. This time around, Cameron is in trouble. He's trying to reunite with a lost love. He's having significant mental breakdowns. He's under fire on multiple fronts. It's the usual Cameron Winter mystery. And of course, he's got that strange habit of mind, which may help save the day. Well, I couldn't be happier to have Andrew back on the show. What a mind, what a talent, what a driving force in the conservative pop culture landscape. There's no one else quite like him. And of course, in the conversation, he doesn't disappoint. He never does. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with the great Andrew Klavan for his new book, A Woman Underground. If you get a chance, it's a perfect stocking stuffer, or just read it now. I don't think you want to wait. I know I didn't. You started with When Christmas Comes. Was this the plan all along, or has it grown as the saga has grown? As a storyteller, did you kind of have this mapped out? Because it feels organic in a way to me as a reader, having read all four, like there was a grand scheme with a big chalkboard and a Glenn Beck-esque situation. But you tell me, how did this evolve?
Yeah, it was about halfway through When Christmas Comes when I thought, this is the first time I've ever written a character that I thought, whose journey I thought would last through an actual series of books. I've never written a series of books. I've written trilogies, but my feeling about a story is that a story has a beginning, middle, and end. And I still feel that that's true. And I feel like I still put people in situations that are going to change them. And the problem with a series is usually the character remains the same and it's only the incidents that change. So about halfway through the first book, I thought, no, this is actually a guy who could take a real journey. And that's when I started to think about that. And it became really important to me that, especially because he's in a state of looking for his identity, he's in a state of searching for who he is and what he wants to do with the rest of his life and whether he can do anything with the rest of his life. I wanted him to actually move. And so I don't always know exactly where things are going, but I do know who he is. And so I know what he would do in certain situations. And so as each story unfolds, I kind of know the kind of reactions that he would have, and they take me to the next stage. And I've been really careful not to let it become stagnant, not to let it become a gimmick that he's on this trip of self-exploration, but to make it an actual part of the drama of the story. And this one, A Woman Underground, is really the crisis point. This is the point when he has really hit that kind of rock bottom where you have to confront who you are and all the worst things about yourself.
One of the huge themes here to me was the blending of fact and fiction. As a critical subplot about the book, kind of a story within a story, a novel based on real events. And I thought, I know so much about you just from listening to your podcast and having followed you for the years. It felt like a commentary on where we are, where fact and fiction is colliding. And it's up to us to kind of decipher what's true, what's not true, even more so than maybe in the past. Did that weigh in your mind? Is it more of the subconscious? Am I reading too much into it?
No, you're not. It developed organically because I started out with the proposition that over the last 20 years or so, all the best fiction, which has mostly been on television, has been about anti-heroes. And I was writing anti-heroes before that. I was writing them in the 90s with books like True Crime, where the people who were actually the heroes of my books were not very good people. And then, of course, came along The Sopranos and The Shield and Breaking Bad and all these stories. And after a while, I started to think, the reason this is happening, I believe, is because we've kind of outlawed manhood. so that only outlaws can be men. The only kind of men we can recognize as real men are outlaws. And so I started to think, well, it would be really interesting to take a guy who has been in some ways an outlaw man, who now wants to become a hero. He wants to go from being an anti-hero to being a hero. And because of that, the country that he's in and the world that he's in is our world. And the challenges that he faces are our challenges. This book in particular, I don't want to write political books. I don't want to write a book that ever puts forward the kind of simplistic political idea that one set of political values will save you and the other will damn you, because that's just not true. There's all kinds of gray, and there are bad guys and good guys on all sides. But I did want him to move in an America that it was as torn apart and as at odds as ours is in. And this one really plummets him into the depths of that division. And so you can't help but bring the real America into the story, because that's the story he's living.
This is a bit of a personal note, but in recent years, I've been struggling to find people in the media that I could trust. The group is shrinking, and almost dramatically at times. I count you, and you've been my North Star in a way. Megyn Kelly has emerged as someone who I feel pretty trustworthy about. I think she's a straight shooter, but
very
again,
remarkable.
The names are falling, and there are two that I can think of. I won't even mention it. I think you've talked about them, and I don't think it takes a lot of sleuthing to figure them out, that have fallen from my eyes. And I guess for you, my question is why? Because I feel like, you're a wise soul and you'll have some insights potentially, but also the figures I'm talking about, I would think, are economically safe. I feel like they've established themselves in a way, and they wouldn't need to go in this direction, yet they're kind of barreling head forth in that direction. What's happening in our culture? It feels like it's unique to this time. Maybe it's not, but it just seems like right now people are just going astray.
It's not unique to this time, but it's different than other times. I think this happens from time to time. And I believe what's happening is we're coming to the end of something. We're coming to the end of my generation, for one thing, but also the ideas that grew out of that generation have failed in various directions. And I think the old conservatism has failed to convince the people that it's a good thing. You can't say, I had this great idea. In a democratic republic, you can't say, I had this great idea, but nobody believed in it, so it's their fault. No, it's your actual job to sell it to people. And of course, leftism has failed in every possible way. I think so much of the anger that is being pumped out on us from the media has to do with the failure of the Great Society of back in the 60s, when they sort of changed the economy to be this, we're going to give you all these benefits out of the common kitty. And all that has failed. It has made life not fairer, not better, it has made life worse. And so now we're in this moment when we're going to have to move into a new generation. We've had one new generation president, who was Barack Obama, and he actually failed. People forget this because they like him, and he's likable. He actually is likable on screen, but they forget that everything he didn't work. And so, we're going to have to come up with some new ideas. And for people who are talkers and thinkers and writers, you have two choices. Either you're going to follow the absolute ideals and values of your heart and of your God and move through this kind of morass, because it's not going to resolve itself for several years, and it may even get violent before it does. And you're going to move toward that light all the time. That's, that to me is the way you should live. And sometimes that costs you. It can cost you audience. It can cost you money. All of these things have happened to me. I've lost money and I've lost audience simply for saying what I thought was true in a moment of turmoil. And look, a lot of people are not going to do that. That's just human nature. They're going to say, oh, the audience is here, or I can build an audience this way, or I can keep safe by doing this. And so you're right. It is a time when it shakes people out, it separates the sheep from the lambs. I'm very flattered by what you say about me, and I hope that I try very hard to go forward with that. But look, it can be tough, and I'm not complaining about this or anything, but just that I was in Hollywood making 6 and 7 figures a year and went almost instantaneously to zero a year when I started to say what I have to say. And I've often said that I've never lost sleep over that, which is true. I would do it again tomorrow in a heartbeat. But it wasn't fun. It's not fun to tell your wife you have to sell your house. It's not fun to have to move from a place you love to someplace else. Those are all things that aren't fun. You do them because that is the good life. That is what life is for. And that's what my faith is about. And that's what my whole life has been about. I don't understand why anybody would put words on paper if you weren't at least trying to find the truth.
I want to switch a little bit to pop culture. You strike me a bit like John Nolte, who we both know and are fond of, where if there's a movie, a TV show, something that they love, that you'll wrap your arms around it and
Right.
shout it from the rooftops. And it's happening less and less. And as a movie critic, I think about the top 10 list this year, and I get a chill because I can't even think of a top 5.
Yeah.
I assume you're in a similar frame of mind, but why is that? And also, are there pockets of hope or artists you see that are maybe change the dynamic, or they're noteworthy, or you think, well, most of pop culture isn't very good right now, but that's good, and this venue's good? Anything along those lines?
Well, yeah, I think there are buds coming up through the ice. That's what I think. We came into a period because of the failure of philosophies, and especially the failure of the philosophy of the clerisy, the chattering classes, which has been a leftist philosophy. The utter and complete failure where, when you have people who are saying that men can become women, or that racism can be solved by more racism, anti-black racism can be solved by anti-white racism, or that, you can solve the problems of fulfilling your responsibility as a man or a woman by cutting off your private parts. That you're dealing with like lunacy. You're not dealing with, these are not like the best and the brightest people. These are the stupidest and the worst people, who have moved into positions of power. And rather than say, we're clueless, we have to give our power up, they just hold on to the power and hope they can bully you into going along. And you can't make art out of falsehood. You cannot make art out of falsehood. I mean, even artists who are evil, like the Marquis de Sade, tell the truth about what they're saying. And so art almost came to a screeching halt. I mean, I seriously feel if there had not been people like me and some older artists who were kind of still clinging to the idea of telling the truth in art, I felt like art would have just like screeched to a halt for a couple of years there. There was nothing whatsoever. And now suddenly I start to see a couple of books that are more honest than other books, a couple of TV shows like Bad Monkey that, it's not like the greatest show ever, but it's a kind of honest, straightforward show about real people in a real situation. It's entertaining. I noticed that Apple TV in particular has opened up a lane, and I won't call it a conservative lane, but it's a non-woke lane where they let people do the sorts of things that people do. You can't make art by pretending that people are something other than they are. You can't make art pretending that women are men and men are women. You can't do it because they're not. And you look at art and you think like, that's not the world I know. So I do see that coming to an end because people have so many options. And even just, going on and doing a 5-minute satire, which I do once a week, they can turn that on instead of watching Saturday Night Live kiss the butt of whatever Democrat politician happens to be sailing through. So I see it crack. I see the ice cracking, but it's just beginning.
Yeah, I think that's really mostly true with comedy. I kind of tick off the same names: Shane Gillis, Tim Dillon, Ryan Long, Tyler Fisher, Joe Rogan. They are fearless. They break the rules. They don't care. And boy, they are refreshing. I had one last question. You and I talk so much about pop culture and conservatives, and you've been rallying the troops, and they haven't been responding until recently. But Am I Racist made about $12 million at the box office, was in the top 10. There were other films that were right-leaning on the top 10. How are we doing? It seems like there's genuine progress here, even though it's a David versus Goliath situation. But are you more hopeful now than a couple of years ago? What's your take?
I'm way more hopeful now. When I started out talking about this, I really, people keep saying, conservatives have been talking about the culture forever. And I thought they weren't when I started,
You were.
I was just like this echo, the culture, nobody was listening. So yeah, I'm much more optimistic. I think, from the very beginning, people would ask me why aren't conservatives good at this? And I used to say, well, we're blacklisted, so we don't really have a chance, and we don't have a chance to fail, which is very important. You can put out 50 movies in Hollywood, and only 2 of them have to be good to fund the entire operation, and we don't have those opportunities. But there is another thing I think that conservatives don't understand about the arts is that we tend to be people very concerned with the moral order, and that makes for a good life. Mm-hmm. But art that is hampered by delivering moral messages actually is not the same thing as art that takes place in the real world. And art should show everything. You know, it should show the whole thing. And it doesn't have to show the bad guy getting caught at the end. It can just show all the things that happen. And if it's honest art, and if it's true to life, because life is a moral proposition, the morality will come through. Like in Shakespeare, you can watch Macbeth, you know, kill his way to the throne, but you understand that he has sacrificed the meaning of life by sacrificing his connection to morality. And I think that that's the thing that we haven't quite gotten hold of yet. We still want to deliver messages. We still want to have morals. And one of the things I'm trying to do in the Cameron Winter books is just send a man, a good man, out into the world to try and find himself and let the world be the world. And I think as we learn that, I think conservatives will get better at what we do, but we need the opportunities. You have to be able to fail in order to succeed. And that's just now starting to open up.
Yeah, I think that's really happening with the Christian films where there were so many
Yes.
mistakes and so many rough edges, and now it's actually it's a maturing space, and it's
Yep.
fascinating to watch and certainly rewarding. But of course, your learning curve happened decades ago. You're great. I really appreciate the work you do. The new book, of course, is A Woman Underground, the latest Cameron Winter mystery. It is available right now on Amazon, or just go to your favorite bookstore to pick it up. Andrew, you're the best. I appreciate all the work you do, and the fact that you wrote a forward to my book a couple of years ago is forever in my heart. I appreciate that so much, and wish you all the best.
Thanks a lot, Christian. It's always great talking to you.